Can a mafia boss's heart survive true love? Nico Volpe, known in the whispers of the underworld as the Shadow, ruled his empire from a villa of cold marble and colder silence. Every corner of the sprawling estate was a testament to his power, every shadow a loyal soldier, every servant a ghost trained in the art of invisibility. He was a king sculpted from granite and grief, his heart encased in the same ice that frosted the windows in winter. Yet, in this meticulously controlled world, one flicker of warmth persisted, unseen by all but him. Her name was Lena. She was a maid, a whisper in the hallways, with eyes the color of warm honey that saw too much. She didn't flinch from his gaze. She met it with a quiet sorrow that mirrored the secret ache in his own soul. He'd watch her tend to the wilting roses in the grand foyer, her touch gentle, coaxing life back into petals that had surrendered to the gloom. Those roses were his last link to a life before blood and betrayal, and she, unknowingly, was tending to the last vestiges of his humanity. Below the polished floors, behind a reinforced steel door that hadn't been opened in a decade, lay the basement. It was a place of legends and nightmares, the final repository of his father's sins, a tomb sealed by Nico himself on the day he took the throne. It was a void, a place of absolute silence, a symbol of the darkness he kept locked away. Tonight the silence broke. Nico sat in his leather-bound study, a glass of amber whiskey sweating in his hand, the city lights a distant, indifferent constellation. The house was a mausoleum, still and breathless. Then he heard it. A sound so alien in its raw terror it seemed to tear the very fabric of the air. A muffled scream, choked off almost as soon as it began, clawing its way up through the floorboards. It was faint, but it was unmistakable. It came from the basement. A cold dread, colder than any enemy's threat, coiled in his gut. He had 1,000 men, a fortress of a home, and yet this sound, this violation, had breached his walls. He strained to listen again, his body rigid. A whimper followed, a desperate, pleading sound that was brutally silenced. In that sliver of sound he recognized the voice. Lena. Every calculated, ruthless instinct that had kept him alive vanished, consumed by a singular, primal rage. The glass shattered in his fist, whiskey and blood dripping onto antique cypress. He was on his feet, the predator within him unleashed not by a rival's challenge, but by the terror of a girl who tended to his dying roses. The sealed basement was no longer a tomb of the past, it was a desecrated sanctuary, and he would rain hell upon whoever had dared to defile it. He moved with the lethal grace of a panther, his men scrambling to follow the storm that was their dawn. He didn't wait for keys or codes. Reaching the reinforced door, he kicked it once, the steel groaning in protest. He kicked it again, the frame splintering, the lock bursting from its housing. The stench of damp earth and fear hit him like a physical blow. The basement was stark, lit by a single bare bulb that swung ominously, casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. And there she was, Lena, bound to a wooden chair, her simple maid's uniform torn at the shoulder, a crimson gag stifling her cries. Her honey-colored eyes were wide with terror, glistening with tears that tracked paths through the dust on her cheeks. Standing over her, a cruel smirk twisting his lips, was Ricardo, his own cousin, his underboss. Nico, Ricardo began, his voice a lazy drawl that did nothing to hide the venom beneath. Just a little house cleaning. Found a rat snooping where she shouldn't. I was teaching her a lesson in loyalty, showing her what happens when the help gets too curious. He gestured to Lena as if she were a piece of furniture, a prop in his little play. He was testing him, dangling his supposed weakness in front of him, daring him to prove he was still the ruthless Shadow King who sacrificed pawns without a second thought. Nico's rage was not hot, it was a glacial inferno. He didn't look at Ricardo. His eyes were locked on Lena, on the terror he had allowed to touch her. The air crackled, the temperature in the room dropping 20 degrees. Get away from her, he said, his voice a low, gravelly whisper that carried more menace than any shout. Ricardo's smirk faltered. He saw the abyss in Nico's eyes. Cousin, it's just... Before Ricardo could finish, Nico crossed the room in 2 strides. He didn't draw a weapon. His hand shot out, grabbing Ricardo by the throat, slamming him against the cold, damp stone. The impact echoed in the chamber. You do not touch what is mine, Nico snarled, his face inches from Ricardo's, the promise of a brutal death in his gaze. He held him there, letting the fear sink in, letting the capos who had followed him down witness their underboss's utter subjugation. Then, with a grunt of disgust, he threw Ricardo to the floor. The message was clear. Justice would come, but it would be by his hand on his time. He turned his back on his humiliated cousin and went to Lena. With surprising tenderness he untied the gag, his bloodied knuckles brushing her skin. He knelt before her, his large frame shielding her from the world. "Say el seguro tesoro," he murmured. "You are safe, treasure." He sliced through her bonds and without a word, scooped her into his arms, carrying her out of the darkness as if she weighed nothing at all. He had just claimed her, not as a possession, but as a part of his soul he would kill to protect. Lena was not returned to the servants' quarters. She was taken to a silken suite adjacent to Nico's own, a room of cream and gold that felt more like a cage than a sanctuary. The scent of antiseptic clung to the air as a private doctor tended to the rope burns on her wrists. Nico stood watch from the doorway, a silent, brooding sentinel. When they were alone, the silence was a living thing, thick with unspoken words and the violent memory of the basement. "Why?" she finally whispered, her voice hoarse. He stepped into the room, his presence consuming the space. "Because no one threatens my household." It was a cold, possessive answer, the Don's answer. But his eyes told a different story. They were dark with a guilt she had never seen in him before. "I am not one of your possessions," she retorted, a spark of her innate fire returning. His lips tightened into a grim line. "In this house, in this life, everything is a possession, Lena. Survival depends on who holds the leash." He came closer, his shadow falling over her. "But for you, I will be the one to hold it." The threat was laced with a strange, terrifying promise of protection. Later, his consigliere Leo found him staring out at the city. "You've made a mistake, Nico," the older man said softly. "You showed your hand. Ricardo sees her as your weakness now. He will use it." Nico didn't turn. "Then let him try," he replied, his voice hard as steel. "Let him see what happens when someone touches my weakness." Days later, seeking an escape from her gilded cage, Lena found her way to a hidden courtyard she'd never known existed. It was a rose garden, a riot of deep crimson and pale blush blooms, their fragrance a sweet rebellion against the villa's sterile opulence. She found him there, Nico, kneeling by a bush of white roses, his large, scarred hands surprisingly gentle as he pruned a withered stem. He wasn't the shadow here. He was just a man tending his garden. He looked up as she approached, his expression unreadable, but he didn't send her away. She walked closer, her fear melting away in the warmth of the sun. "They're beautiful," she said, her voice soft. "They were my mother's," he confessed, the words sounding rusted from disuse. "She said a man who can't keep a rose alive can't keep a family safe." Lena reached out, her fingers hovering over a perfect blood-red bloom. "And what do you say?" she asked, her gaze piercing, seeing past the Don to the lonely boy he must have been. He stood, turning to face her fully. The air grew thick, charged with the scent of roses and something far more intoxicating. "I say, she was right." He looked from the rose to her lips, his control fraying. "She also said the most beautiful roses have the sharpest thorns." To protect them he lifted his hand, his thumb brushing her cheek, a touch that was both a reverence and a brand. "I should have protected you better, Mia Rosa." The kiss that followed was inevitable. A collision of darkness and light, a desperate tender claiming in the heart of his secret sanctuary. Ricardo watched from the shadows of a balcony, his heart a knot of black envy. He saw the kiss in the garden. He saw the way Nico looked at the maid, the way a starving man looks at a feast. The weakness Leo had warned of was not just a crack. It was a chasm, and Ricardo would drive the entire Volpe family into it. His humiliation in the basement festered, turning from anger into a cold, calculated plan for vengeance. He began his work in the whispers of back alleys and the smoke-filled rooms of rival syndicates. He met secretly with the Falcones, a family with a long-standing grudge against the Volpes, feeding them information, stoking their ambition. "Nico has gone soft," he'd hiss, his words dripping poison. "He risks us all for a servant girl. His mind is not on business. The Volpe territory is ripe for the taking." He carefully orchestrated small, disruptive attacks on Volpe shipments, making them look like Falcone aggression. He manufactured chaos, creating an atmosphere of crisis that would demand a strong, ruthless response. A response he knew the lovesick Nico was no longer capable of giving. Ricardo's final move was to leak Nico's schedule for the upcoming week, specifically a rare trip he would be making outside the villa's protection, a visit to a small church to light a candle on the anniversary of his mother's death. And he would ensure Lena was with him. The perfect bait, the perfect catalyst for the perfect ambush. The day was gray and heavy, the sky threatening rain. Nico had insisted Lena accompany him, a quiet act of defiance against the prison his life had become. For a few hours he wanted to pretend they were just a man and a woman. The illusion shattered in a hail of gunfire as their armored car turned onto a quiet, narrow street. The windows spiderwebbed. The driver slumped over the wheel. They were pinned down, a sitting duck in a kill box orchestrated by the Falcones, fueled by Ricardo's treachery. Nico's training took over instantly. His first unthinking move was to shove Lena to the floor of the car, shielding her body with his own. "Stay down," he roared, drawing his weapon. Bullets ripped through the metal frame of the car, the sound deafening. He returned fire through the shattered window, a cold, precise killer once more. But he was distracted, his focus split between the attackers and the woman trembling beneath him. It was the vulnerability Ricardo had counted on. As Nico paused to reload, a Falcone gunman charged the car, his weapon raised. Lena saw him in the side mirror. With a surge of adrenaline, she grabbed the heavy silver box from the seat, a gift he'd bought her, and flung open her door just enough to hurl it at the attacker's head. The man stumbled, his shot going wide, giving Nico the split second he needed. He fired twice and the threat was neutralized. Their eyes met in the smoky chaos, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. He was her shield and she his fire. They were no longer Dawn and Maid. They were partners in survival. They made it back to the villa, battered but alive. The mask of the untouchable Dawn was cracked, replaced by a grim, murderous fury. While Nico saw to Lena's safety, Leo had done his work. The old consigliere met him in the study, his face etched with grim satisfaction. On the desk lay a burner phone and a ledger. The ambush wasn't just the Falcones, Leo stated, his voice low. It was a joint venture. Ricardo paid them. He planned to eliminate you and blame them, igniting a war he would step in to win as the new Dawn. The evidence was irrefutable. The betrayal was absolute. Nico called a meeting. Every capo, every soldier of importance, was summoned to the grand hall. Ricardo was brought to the center of the room, flanked by two of Nico's most loyal men. He still wore a mask of arrogant indignation until Nico threw the burner phone at his feet. "Explain this," Nico commanded, his voice echoing off the marble. Ricardo's composure finally broke. He spat on the floor. "You're weak. You let a worthless whore soften you, blind you." He pointed a shaking finger at Lena, who stood near the doorway, refusing to hide. "She is the poison that will kill us all." But his words held no power. The men looked from their seething underboss to their calm, lethal Dawn, and then to the woman who stood tall beside him. They saw not weakness but a different kind of strength. Lena met every hostile gaze, her chin held high, her presence a silent testament to her loyalty, a loyalty Ricardo knew nothing about. The room fell silent, the judgment already passed. "Family is built on loyalty," Nico said, his voice cutting through the tension. "Betrayal is a cancer. It must be cut out." He looked at Ricardo, not with rage, but with a chilling finality. "You broke the code of Omerta. You conspired against your own blood. You are no longer Volpe." He gestured to his men. Ricardo was dragged away, his fate sealed by the very laws he had sought to manipulate. Justice was served, swift and absolute. But when Nico turned back to his men, his posture had changed. He was no longer just the Shadow King, a ruler of fear. "For too long we have ruled from the darkness," he announced, his voice resonating with a new authority. "From now on we will be defined not by the fear we inspire, but by the strength of our bonds. Loyalty will be our shield, not secrecy." His gaze found Lena across the room. He walked to her, ignoring the stunned silence of his capos. He took her hand, his blood-stained fingers lacing with hers. "I offered you protection," he said, his voice soft enough for only her to hear, yet his actions visible to all. Now I offer you my heart. My world is dangerous and it may never be safe. You are free to walk away, and I will not stop you." Lena looked at their joined hands, then up into his eyes, seeing the man, the protector, the lover. "Your world is my world now," she whispered. "My home is with you." A murmur went through the room, a shift from shock to a dawning respect. Later, in the garden as the sun set, they stood together before his mother's white roses. He placed a perfect, newly bloomed flower in her hair. Can a love born in a dark basement truly bring light to a world built on shadows? Can a mafia boss's heart, once claimed, ever truly be reformed? Tell me what you think in the comments below. Share this story if you believe in a love that conquers all. And don't forget to tell us your own epic love story.